Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this morning. This is a news conference with Attorney General Phil Weiser about the upcoming Kroger-Albertsons trial to block the merger of these two grocery stores. Just a few notes before we get started here. The Attorney General will speak after I am done here introducing him. Then he also has a guest today, Patience Kabwasa, who will also speak during this news conference. So if you have any questions, we will be taking them after both of them give remarks. Just be sure to either raise your hand or put your question in the chat function in Zoom, and the Attorney General will answer them. Please identify yourself and the publication that you are with when you write in your question or when you are called on when your hand is raised. We will be sending a press release after this news conference, so keep eyes out for it in your inboxes. So without further ado, I introduce to you Colorado Attorney General Phil Weiser.
Thank you, Lawrence. Thank you, Patience, for joining us. Patience Kabwasa runs a great nonprofit known as Food to Power. And what I'll tell you about this case is it's all about Coloradans' access to healthy, fresh, local food, and to make sure that grocery stores don't become even less competitive than today. It's worth noting that we already have food deserts today. We already have concerns with the existing market concentration. The reason we filed this lawsuit is because if Kroger, who owns King Soopers and City Market, is able to buy Albertsons, who owns Safeway, in what would be an almost $35 billion merger, it's going to harm consumers. It's going to harm workers. It's going to harm farmers. It's going to harm communities. We already had in July a district court judge rule that this merger had a reasonable probability of violating the law here in Colorado, the Colorado Antitrust Act. That ruling put a temporary pause on the merger. We're now prepared for what we believe will be the case that will end this merger and will prevent it from harming Coloradans. It's worth noting, as I said, that we're dealing with a situation that is already not great, and we're worried about it getting worse. This merger would concentrate a market and create a mega grocery store that would be able to raise prices, have less variety, have fewer stores, offer less local food, less customer service, and more. We heard this in 19 town halls across the state. Patience joined us in one of those in Colorado Springs. She heard the same sorts of concerns I did through a listening tour. We got thousands of comments, not just at this listening tour operation, but also through online comments. Over 6,000 people shared what they thought. The feedback was clear. It was consistent. Coloradans are concerned about this merger, about food deserts, about a lack of choices, about a lack of competition. Many said to me, I look every week and I see what's on sale in which supermarket, and I go there, and I'm worried about having to pay more. Others said to me in the western part of our state, we're worried about resilience. If we have fresh milk or fresh eggs at the Safeway, maybe there's a supply chain disruption and there isn't available at the City Market. If they merge, what's going to happen? This case comes at a time when there are two parallel cases. One is a federal lawsuit in Oregon, where the judge has the evidence and will rule sometime in the upcoming months. Another, a state lawsuit in Washington state that is proceeding as well. We brought this case in Colorado under our laws because we want to control our own destiny and protect Coloradans. What we're going to be able to do in this case is bring very specific Colorado evidence, the type of harm. Higher prices is one core concern. We know these two chains monitor each other's prices. And when there's a lack of competition, prices go up. There are examples that make that point crystal clear. It's also important to note there are other dimensions of competition, not just price, but customer service, variety and choice, and local foods. We've heard when I was out in the Western Slope from the Palisade Peaches growers, they said, we have two companies competing to offer Palisade peaches today. Those two companies merge, they're not going to have the same competitive pressure to offer our products on the shelves. This is a real concern. In Gunnison, the concern was we only have two supermarkets. I mentioned the resilience concern earlier. If those markets merge and someone wants to go elsewhere, we're talking about 65 miles to Salida or Montrose. This is why Coloradans are so concerned. They see this merger as harmful to them. For workers, this merger raises real concerns about their jobs. I heard again and again, including from one worker in Canyon City who said she worked in Craig, Colorado before the Safeway-Albertsons merger. After that merger, they closed the store. She moved to Canyon City. She lost her seniority, and she said, it could happen again to me. We're thinking about those workers and the way they show up for their customers. That's part of how these two firms compete. How do we know that so clearly? Because when there was a strike here in Denver, what did the King Soopers do? They approached Safeway and said, let's have an agreement so you won't poach our workers. They didn't want to compete with one another for workers, and they engaged in illegal collusion. We're seeking civil penalties because of that concern. We also know during that same time, they had a non-solicitation agreement about pharmacy customers. These pharmacy customers are very important because they tend to be loyal. This is an example of collusion. We're concerned about more collusion if this merger happens. We here in Colorado know that we're better off with competition. Right now, the two firms, Kroger and Albertsons, are the main two grocery stores for many Coloradans. Walmart is another one, and it's not enough to have Walmart as an alternative. Walmart doesn't offer the same type of local foods, whether Olathe corn or Rocky Mountain cantaloupes that Coloradans have grown accustomed to. We want to have people eating healthy, fresh, local Colorado food. This merger will help make sure that can still happen. The parties have argued if they give some of these stores to CNS, then it will, in effect, address the competitive harm of this merger. We disagree. CNS is a national distribution company. It operates very few stores. It doesn't have the infrastructure or the platform to do so. And we're worried about a repeat of what we saw last time. When Safeway and Albertsons merged, they spun off stores to a company called Hagen's. Hagen's was not able to operate their stores effectively. They either closed down or they were sold back to the merged firm. That was a disaster. We do not want to have this disaster happen again, where consumers and workers and farmers will bear the brunt of it. But not just that. Communities are hurt. After the Safeway-Albertsons merger, the store in Glenwood Springs, for example, was closed down. And it remained an eyesore in that community. I've heard about this in other communities in Colorado where stores close and the area remains vacant. A blight in the community, a food desert, and undermining development. This case is about Colorado communities, and I've heard from communities across the state. We know people are pinched at the checkout counter. We know that there are real concerns about higher prices. This merger will make things worse. And the idea that the companies can just say, don't worry, prices won't go up, jobs won't be lost, that's not enough. Because we can see what's happened before with prior mergers where prices did go up, where stores were closed, where workers got their jobs ended in ways that harmed them and their families. That's why we're taking on this case. And as we do so, we bring all the stories that we've heard from around the state. Patience, you showed up and you helped us understand the needs of your community. I'd love for you to share a few words at this time.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, AG Weiser, for the invitation and just for your fierce leadership in blocking this merger. In the summer of 2023, our local community in Colorado Springs experienced what it looks like when a grocery store closes, a major grocery store that was one of three. And mind you, that's a Kroger and a Safeway, or two of the three, in a community that serves about 100,000 residents. You don't just lose a grocery store. You lose a place to buy your prescription drugs. You lose a place to pay your bills. You lose a place to access local food. And what I know, running a nonprofit who works to bolster food security and food sovereignty amongst low-income individuals, is all of the accessing food is not just the grocery store. It's layered in transportation, it's layered in income, and all of these things build up upon each other when you're just trying to do things like get to the grocery store that's on the bus line. So when a grocery store closes and you are challenged to take 3 bus routes across the city just so you can get the same eggs, that cuts into your workday. When you're already making a low income, the chances of you shopping at places like 7-Eleven or any convenience store are going to increase because it's more convenient and time effective and cost effective for you to do so. So then you're getting price gouged for just not having transportation, and you are often left with the options that those convenience stores have to offer, which then just trickles into affecting your health. And so we as an organization didn't get magic resources to service the people that came to visit our food pantry or our no-cost grocery program when the grocery store closed. And mind you, it was for different reasons, but along this journey, I've been able to talk to union workers. I've been able to talk to folks who worked inside of that King Soopers, and hearing stories about workers having pantries within the grocery store because their livable wages aren't where they need to be, or sleeping in cars because they're trying to make ends meet and navigate housing costs as well as food prices. And so the people that are actually servicing us, food workers, grocery store workers, farmers, the ones who are running our food system are the ones who pay the price when competition is less, when you have to compete with Walmart and a big distribution center in order to sell your cantaloupes or any of your fresh peaches. You are not going to be able to compete at that level of scale, which means you are going to be moving your product for even less of what it's worth because you're being competing with bigger conglomerates. So we are in support of blocking this merger because we know who it affects and who bears the brunt. And it's communities of color, it's low income communities, and it's often communities who have multiple intersections already bearing the brunt, but who are also making sure that we have food on the table to feed our families. There was a time where a grocery store clerk was a middle-class income, similar to a postal worker. Those days are shrinking, are almost non-existent, and it affects us all. It affects, the deli clerk or the butcher. If they can't make a livable wage doing what used to be a trade, an honorable trade, then we are going to be in a position where that industry is not serving the folks who serve us. So we absolutely support the blocking of this merger.
Thank you, Patience, for your leadership. We are so fortunate to have you in Colorado fighting for people. I would now like to open up the floor for any questions. I expect we have a few. Feel free to, as Lawrence noted, put them in the Q&A or raise your hands. I'll start with the first question in the Q&A, which is from Gabe Allen. Which of the 3 lawsuits do we anticipate ending first? I don't know. That is going to be an interesting mystery because there's no way to really know how long each judge is going to take. They each need to take the time to get the ruling right. Will an early ruling from the FTC or the Washington case affect the trial in Colorado? I think the chance that either case has a ruling before our trial is over is probably vanishingly small. It's quite possible the ruling could come before the trial court renders a decision. That's a possibility that the then judge in Colorado could look at. I will say the evidence in Colorado is unique to Colorado. It's a Colorado story. It's Colorado harms. And so we anticipate our decision being unique. And that's why I wanted to bring our case, because we had specific issues that we wanted to bring forward. And we will look forward to that being adjudicated. All right. Next up, another question. What's being done to prepare for the lawsuit, and where can I get a recording? I don't know if any of the TV stations are recording this press conference. They usually do, and in which case they will probably post it. As for the lawsuit, I believe it will be live streamed. You can go look at the Denver District Court to make sure you're up to speed on the proceedings of the day, and the filings in the case, pretrial briefs, post-trial briefs, et cetera, are also public. Any takeaways from the prior cases and how it might bear on the cases here? I will say the big takeaway is the contrast that I mentioned. Our case is really about Colorado, about the impact that myself and patients talked about. I think that FTC case had some national themes. Those are not ones that we're going to focus on. If the merger goes through, how will your office hold Kroger and Albertsons accountable to commitments? Diane, this is an important point. Those commitments are not legally enforceable. They're not subject to legal oversight. They are literally paper promises. So there is no mechanism based on a paper promise to hold a company to account. That's why I said earlier, those promises are not sufficient to rely on to say this merger is okay. How long will the case last? I think it could last up to 3 weeks. I believe that's how much time the judge has allocated. When's it expected to start? On Monday will be the first day, and it will go until it's completed. What happens if the merger does not go through? The answer is we'll go back to how things were before the merger was proposed. These two companies are expected to compete with one another. We benefit from that competition. We want to see that competition. The other point I would mention, in addition to stopping the merger, I mentioned 2 separate antitrust offenses: a no-poach agreement that harmed employees and a non-solicitation agreement that deprives customers of competition. We are also seeking relief and civil penalties in both those matters as well. Are you seeking a national injunction or a statewide injunction? We are seeking to protect competition that we had before. That protection can't just be the stores alone. They don't exist on an island. The stores depend on national infrastructure, the house brands, the supply chains, the IT systems. We want an injunction to protect competition and to prevent the harm this merger would allow. You mentioned prior cases of larger companies buying smaller chains. How many people were affected, and can you provide examples? We will, for sure, be going through prior cases and talk about how they harm consumers and how competition was lessened. And some of that evidence that you're asking for, again, like I said, is going to be publicly available starting next week. If Colorado succeeds in blocking the merger, will there be a quick impact on food inflation? The message that stopping this merger sends is that we're committed to competition, not consolidation and collusion. Making a statement of that kind is important to protecting competition and protecting all the benefits patients and I talked about. We are deeply committed to that work. What should shoppers know? Shoppers need to know we're fighting for them. We heard you. We're in court. You can follow it. And as we do this work, we're thinking about you. You're the reason we're doing it. Companies have Wall Street analysts saying if the merger doesn't go through, there'll be more closures, and they can't compete with Walmart. I want to offer a couple comments here. Many people have already forgotten this. When this merger was announced, at the same time, there was a major payout to Albertsons shareholders who were a hedge fund. And at the time, they said, don't worry about this payout. The merger doesn't influence the payout. If the merger stopped, the fact that we're doing the payout won't stop the companies from being able to compete. Nothing about this action, billions of dollars, is going to harm potential competition in case the merger is stopped. That's what the company said then. They cannot go to court and say the opposite in court because a prior court relied on those statements to allow that dividend to happen. I also believe that Albertsons, as a viable going concern, can continue to operate and that they don't need to merge to survive, that they are currently both thriving companies and they are in this marketplace, which is already, by any measure, somewhat concentrated. Is the no poach agreement and non-solicitation agreement being challenged in the trial? Yes, it is. That is in the case, and it serves two purposes in this case. The first purpose, it shows how these two companies look at one another as their close competitor. You'll notice Kroger didn't go to Walmart and ask them for a no poach agreement or non-solicitation agreement. They went to Albertsons. That's revealing. And secondly, it's an independent violation that we are in court to fight for consumers and to make a clear statement that we're going to enforce the antitrust laws here in Colorado. What bearing on the other cases will have on Colorado? If the Oregon court rules for the FTC, while the Colorado case is still pending, does that render the Colorado case moot? That's a good question. I want to make something clear. Until and unless the parties abandon the merger, walk away from it, say it's not going to happen, this case is ripe for decision, and we're going to keep fighting. It's worth noting if the FTC case is successful, there could be an appeal in that case. If our case is successful, there could be an appeal in our case. So until the parties walk away from the merger or a court stops it and the parties accept the ruling of the court, we have work to do. What about the lawsuit against the FTC's administrative capacity and whether it's constitutional? I've not focused on that lawsuit, so I don't have any views I can share. Patience, any thoughts you want to share in any of the above comments I just made before we give final chance for the press?
Thank you so much, AG Weiser. I want us to really center and think about the folks who are most affected if this merger goes through. Yes, the pockets of hedge funds will be lined, but does that economic commerce trickle down to the folks who are making sure that you and I and all Coloradans get their food every single day? And the answer to that question, history has shown us, is no, it doesn't. People's pensions are at risk, their jobs are at risk, which increases food security. Farmers' livelihoods are at risk, who, mind you, already have one of the highest suicide rates in the country because they cannot make ends meet. And they are the ones who are giving their lives to make sure that we have food. Communities of color who already are experiencing the consequences of living in communities that are vapid of food access, who have to go through a complex web of resources in order to make sure that they're putting food on the table. Those are the folks who are going to be most affected if this merger goes through. And I really would just implore you to do your research and look at what has happened in communities in the past when mergers like this go through.
Let me offer a closing thought building on Patience in her leadership. We're living right now at a time that is a connection crisis. People are more disconnected, are more isolated and lonely than ever before. What I learned and what I saw during this whole process inspired me. Our supermarkets are part of our town square. People meet each other in the town square. The workers know who the consumers are. The consumers know who the workers are. Disinvesting, having less competition, having less choice and availability of supermarkets harms our society. Patience made this point. I want to underline it. Getting local fresh food that I talked about makes people healthier, better mental health, better physical health. When people have less choices about food, can't get fresh food, can't get local food, they're eating worse, they fare worse. And the workers and the farmers are already, in many cases, pushing the envelope about how they can live. And they need the benefits of competition. This merger would deprive them of the benefits of competition, would leave Colorado worse off. This case matters. It matters deeply to Colorado. We don't take this step lightly. Colorado has never filed an antitrust case to stop a merger in state court and litigated the case. We're doing it now. And we're doing it because it matters. This will have a big impact, not just on consumers' pocketbooks, but on consumers' health, on our society, on our communities, our workers, and more. It's an honor to be able to do this work, and Patience, you and others who spoke up, you're the reason we're bringing this case. And we're bringing you front and center here, Patience, because you represent so many of the people who I met and I was touched by. Thank you for your leadership, Patience. Thank you all for following this. Lawrence, I'll let you bring us home.
Thank you, AG. This concludes the news conference. We will be sending out a press release as soon as we finish up here. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is on the news release. Thank you very much and have a great day.